definition of warrior leadership is, I have found my purpose in the world. I have learned how to bring my purpose to others. I am living my purpose, leaving nothing on the table, nothing untried, living my someday goals as now. Welcome to the Warriors at Work podcast, hosted by Jennifer Baldwin, President of E9 Corporate Coaching, where we help you become a warrior at work so that you get to fully live.
Hey everyone, welcome to the fourth episode of the Warriors at Work podcast. This week we're doing a series called Staying Engaged in Work During a Crisis. And one of the things I talk about in my coaching courses is that my entire sales and marketing process, which is not what I'm talking about right now, but it's an illustrative example, is created to get people out of it's fine. Because we like to be comfortable. We get to a place in our lives where we have been doing. Kids and jobs and houses, laundry, garbage, mowing the lawn, commuting, working, commuting home, kids, significant others, eating, cooking, sleeping, doing it again. And it just sort of seemingly never ends. And most of us at some point after years of that wake up wondering if this is all there is. And we talk about that a lot more in my first online course of the Warriors at Work course series. And getting people, what happens as a result is when we reach that place of doing, we kind of settle into it's fine. I have a house, I have a car, I have a job, I have this title, I have whatever it is that I have, it's fine. I'm really busy, it's fine. My marriage is sort of okay, it's fine. And we get kind of numb and kind of stuck in just telling ourselves it's fine. Because most of the time we're kind of tired managing everything that's going on in our lives. And we don't really want to start a whole new thing. We don't really want to start a whole new initiative of trying to get out of it's fine, or wondering what else there is, or wondering if there's something more, until we've been in it's fine for a number of years, and we wake up one day and it suddenly hits us, is this it? Is there something more? And so that's what gave rise to, are you fine, or are you absolutely on fire in your life? Now, being on fire can also be tiring, so I'm not necessarily suggesting that we should be on fire every day for the rest of our lives. But there are varying degrees of being on fire. I've been on fire in my life and in my work for a year, and now I'm tired, and I'm going to just relax for a month or two, and then I'm going to go back to it and be back at it. It's really about who are you. It's not about what are you doing in this moment. It's about who are you? Where do you exist from? Do you exist generally from a place of it's fine? Or do you exist generally from a place of being lit up and on fire? And I know that you're thinking, well, that's an awfully interesting topic to be talking about right now, given that we're in the middle of a crisis. How on earth am I supposed to be on fire when we have this crisis going on? And if you haven't listened to the first 3 episodes of this podcast, I would strongly recommend you do that now, because it sort of builds up to what I'm about to talk about. We talked about in the first one to give yourself grace and give others grace as well. And this begins to create some mental, emotional space. I know that a lot of us need more physical space as well, with our entire families in our house. But giving yourself grace about how you handle all of the unusual circumstances going on right now, giving your coworkers grace, giving your family grace, starts to just create some more mental, emotional space for dealing with things. And we talked about that in the first episode. Then we talked about shifting from fear to fact, from being gripped by the current circumstances to simply managing the current circumstances being what they are. And there were some suggestions about exactly how to do that in the second episode. One of them is to find something that compels you, not passively, but actively, that draws you in. And then in the last episode, we talked about shifting from knowing to not knowing. Since we went from a place of knowing so many things about our lives to a place of not knowing so many things about our lives right now, our brains will naturally want to gravitate to a place, and especially our amygdala, of knowing what's going to happen. And we will start making predictions and deciding that we know how this is going to go. We know that it's going to be exhausting having everyone in our house all the time. We know that our jobs, our finances are going to be on shaky ground. We know all these things that then just increase our anxiety and our fear and freak us out. And so what I was encouraging in the last episode was to allow yourself to not know. For now, keep your brain from honing in on a decision about how things are going to be, and just allow it to be whatever it is today, in this moment. And that creates more mental, emotional space. For in this moment, I feel like I don't have enough space in my house, but maybe I'm going to get used to it. In this moment, I feel like my finances or whatever are on shaky ground, but I don't actually know that. And maybe things are going to shift, which creates more room for different possibilities and different perspectives. And as we do all of that, then we get to shift from, in a particular model, in a particular pattern of thinking I talked about in the last podcast, we get to shift from a perspective of there's nothing I can do about it to a perspective of I determine how it goes. That's what guides all of our actions and decisions during the day. And I don't mean by I determine how it goes, I don't mean that you get to decide how everyone else around you is going to be, because they also get to determine how it goes for them. And so it takes a little bit of experimentation to get used to this perspective. But if you go from there's nothing I can do about it to I determine how it goes, then what you end up with is a house full of people that are each determining for themselves how they want things to go. And then when those things clash, everyone gets to determine for themselves how they want to respond to it. So we go from, we give ourselves grace, give everyone else grace. We shift from fear to fact, find something that compels us, allow ourselves to be in not knowing, and shift from there's nothing I can do about it to I determine how it goes for me. All of this will begin to then calm your amygdala, which we talked about over the last few days, is a part of your brain that keeps you safe from lions and tigers in the dark. And most people's amygdalas are freaking out right now. To your amygdala, all of this confusion about the current world circumstances is the same thing as lions and tigers in the dark. And so, if we're able to do these things that I've just discussed, the overall effect it will have is to calm your amygdala and to get it to stop freaking out and driving all of your responses. And then we can begin to create a warrior state. Now, here's the difference. We have an emotional state and we have a warrior state. I am not suggesting, by calming your amygdala and creating a warrior state, I am not suggesting that we ignore any emotions that we're having. Now, there are a lot of articles that have come out recently about grief and about people grieving what's happening with the world, with the economy, with whatever, with a level of uncertainty. And there has been this recent focus on grief. And I'm not suggesting at all that if that's what's there for you, that you ignore it. In fact, I will promise you that ignoring it will make it last longer. So if that's where you are, what I would actually suggest is that you give yourself a time limit and then just dive into it. So decide, depending on what it is you're dealing with, decide whether your time limit is an hour, a day, or a week. And that for that period of time, you're going to be grumpy and difficult and unhappy and negative and depressed and pissed off. Give yourself that time to just be whatever that is. And then decide at some point when you're going to come out of it so that you don't get stuck there. And if you get to the point where it's time to come out of it and you really, really can't come out of it, give yourself another time to come out of it. But deal with what there is to be dealt with so you can then move forward. So, calm your amygdala, doing the things we were just talking about. Second, don't ignore your emotional state. Deal with what there is to be dealt with. Your emotional state is necessary and important, but it's also, generally speaking, when we're talking about all the negative emotions, it's generally temporary and undesired. And so my assumption that I'm making for this podcast is that you don't want to stay there forever. You don't want to stay in fear and grief and anxiety. That you want to deal with it in order to then move through it and move on. The state that we're going to move on to is your warrior state, which is desired and permanent. And the first online course is about warrior self and doing an exercise to locate your warrior self. This warrior state has several components, and I created an acronym to make it easy to remember what these components are. These components begin to create the conditions during a crisis to then be your warrior self and live in your warrior state. And the acronym is PACIFY, because we're going to pacify your amygdala with all of this. So the first is purpose. And there's lots written on purpose. There are books written on purpose. There are lots of coaches that coach on purpose. For the Warriors at Work series is about warrior purpose, which is a very specific model and a very specific goal about finding your ultimate, your deepest, why you are here on earth kind of purpose. And that's not what I'm talking about right now. Right now, I'm talking about wherever you are, whatever you're living in right now, whatever your living environment is, with whoever is there and whatever job you're dealing with. I'm talking about finding purpose in it. And I'm not talking about finding fake purpose and trying to put a silver lining on things. It goes back to what I spoke about in the second podcast about shifting from fear to fact. And one of the ways to do that is to find something that compels you. For now, that is your purpose. Whatever that thing is that you're going to identify that's been shifting from to-do list to to-do list that you've always wanted to do that you haven't done, you're now going to find time to do that. And I know for some of you, finding time to do that will be hard. And yet, this is what is going to shift your entire being, your entire experience of what's going on in your life right now, is to find something that compels you. That's going to be your purpose for now. Second, take action in that direction. In order to take action in that direction, you're going to fight with your schedule and start to figure out how do you find the space for yourself. And this is one of the most challenging things that comes up for folks in the Warriors at Work course series, is that it is so much easier to find time to do things that are expected of us by our boss or our kids or our significant other or someone else. And we tend to then leave until the end the things that we want to just do for ourselves. And what actually happens, that we talk about in the third course, Warrior Time, what actually happens is when we do the things that we need to do for ourselves, our energy dramatically shifts from being tired and drained to being energized and on fire. And then we can do more for other people. There's that old saying that to take care of yourself first in order to have more energy to take care of other people. When you go, like I did 3 weeks ago, snowboarding, and you're looking at the view from the top of the mountain, all of your energy completely shifts to a place of, this is amazing. Everything is lighter, everything is easier, it's less stressful, it's more pleasant. So taking action will, toward your purpose, will cause you to figure out how you're going to find time right now with all of these conditions for you to do what you need to do to be re-energized. For some of you, it might be reading a book. It might be that you've always wanted to read War and Peace and it's going to take a month. and therefore, sitting and reading a book is what you're going to do. That counts as an action if there's purpose in it for you and it's re-energizing you. Third, the C in pacify is creativity. So when we begin to calm our amygdala and we begin to find something that creates purpose, and we begin to take action toward it and our energy shifts, we get into a more creative place about ourselves, about our lives, about what we want. It allows us to consider things from a different perspective than we have in a while. I had the hardest time. I went for a while, for a number of years, when I was first building this company, I was so busy all the time that I didn't meditate. And then I eventually started meditating again. And I had the hardest time meditating because I would sit down and quiet everything and be still, and my brain would just explode with creative ideas. And usually the way that I handle that when I'm meditating is I keep a notepad and a pen next to me so that I can open my eyes and write down whatever it is the thought is that I don't want to forget, so I can then let it go back to meditating. But what kept happening was I would sit down to meditate and then end up writing down thoughts for 40 minutes and then my meditation time was over. So there is something that happens when we go from a place of being stressed and in constant doing, and then we find purpose and we start taking action and we calm our amygdala and we get into a place of higher energy, that all of our creativity starts to come out. And we get to think about what it is that we really want, and we get to consider things in new ways. Fourth is integrity. And I love the word integrity because it has two definitions that are fantastically complementary. So the first definition of integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, or moral uprightness, which sounds a little heavy-handed. But the reason I bring this up is because during times like this, people sometimes are tempted to get desperate and do things in ways that they wouldn't normally do. And the thing is that you can never undo that. And I do partially mean that you can never undo it for yourself. Like if you do something that you're not proud of, it tends to stick in the back of your mind for a long time that you did something you're not proud of because you're in a desperate place. But I also mean that you can never undo that for the other person. Whoever you're having that, it's sort of like, for example, if you've had a good friend for several years and one day you find out that they recently lied to you about something that matters. And I don't mean about lying about their weight on their driver's license. That's not what I'm talking about. But in that moment, you now know that you've gone from having a friend who will never lie to you to a friend who would. And it doesn't matter if they apologize. What you've just learned is they're willing to lie. So if you ever mess with integrity, you probably won't be able to ever get it back with that person. And it'll then leave a mark on your brain for a long time. So make sure that as you're dealing with whatever circumstances you're dealing with right now, that you maintain integrity and you maintain a self that you're proud of. Second, that will then feed to the second definition of integrity, which is the state of being whole and undivided. So like a building has integrity, your person, your being, your existence, your life has integrity as a state of being whole and undivided. And the more that you do things that you are proud of and don't do things, and sometimes make difficult decisions that you don't want to make in order to stay in integrity, the first definition, the more it will then support the second definition. Fifth is focus. I've heard a lot of people saying that they don't have focus right now. I've witnessed this in some of my clients. I've seen people posting about it on Facebook. And I have two things to say about that. First, having purpose and taking action toward your purpose, having something that will compel you, will help you be focused. I realize that you may need focus at work, and that may be the challenge. And it's possible that maybe the thing that will compel you, that you will do that has purpose, is actually related to your work, which would be great, but it doesn't have to be. And if focus is something that you're struggling with right now, I highly recommend that you Google or read The One Thing by Gary Keller of Keller Williams Real Estate, which is fascinating because what he advocates, it's a great book and there's a lot in it, but to be brief, what he advocates for is picking one thing that you can do today that will support the one thing you want to do this week, that will support the one thing you want to do this month. And here's what happens as a result. If you really are committing to only one thing, then you have to decide which thing is most important. I noticed back several years ago that the one thing I was committing to do was finishing the book I was writing. And that every day I was going to get up and do that. And every day I got up and read a book that I really wanted to finish reading. And it forced me to confront myself about what really was most important to me right then. Now, because here's the thing, if we pick 2 or 3 things that are the most important, like if I had picked reading the book I wanted to read, and finishing writing my book, and posting an article on LinkedIn, it doesn't make it clear which thing I'm going to prioritize, which thing I'm going to do when. And then it brings in time management or time blocking or all of the other theories about how to manage multiple projects. If you pick one thing, you have to be really clear with yourself about what that one thing is, and then you instantly know when you're not doing it. So as I got up for the second or third morning in a row and was reading this book I wanted to read, I noticed that I wasn't writing my book. And so I shifted my one thing, and I had a conversation with myself and realized I really felt like it was important to finish reading that book first before I finished writing my book. And so I made the one thing for that week reading the book I wanted to read. And then the next week, my one thing was finishing writing my book. So if you're having a hard time focusing, pick one thing. And your one thing I would recommend should either be something really important at work. It depends on what you're dealing with, but it should either be something really important at work that you're afraid you're not going to get done because you're lacking focus. Pick one thing that needs to get done. Or have your one thing be the thing that compels you, that creates purpose for you, that will help shift your psyche and your energy to a different place and calm your amygdala. And here's the other thing that's great about picking one thing. You can't forget what it is. You don't have to look it up on a list. If I have 3 things that I have to remember and I'm really busy in the middle of my workday, there's a 50-50 chance that I won't be able to name all 3. I'll be able to name 2 of them because I got so much going on in my head at one time. If you have one thing that you're committing to for today, or one thing that you're committing to for this week, it's really, really hard to forget what that is. And so you can use that to fill in all the moments. The moment that you have a 15-minute lull between one meeting and another, you return to your one thing. As soon as work is over, or while your kids are still finishing their homework, you return to your one thing. You check in with yourself 5 times a day, every time you're not doing something, about whether you can go do your one thing and when the last time is you did your one thing. I strongly recommend that you pick one thing if you're having a focus challenge. And the last in the PACIFY acronym, we've gone through purpose, action, creativity, integrity, and focus. The last is yes. And I kind of hate that this is the last word because I really think it's cheesy that when people talk about having a yes attitude. And it really is what's needed right now because a lot of us are in a place of no. A lot of us are in a place of this isn't going to work. The economy isn't going to be good. I don't like having all these people in the house all the time. I don't like being at home all the time. I don't like not being able to leave. Whatever it is that's going on, whatever it is that's stressing you out, it probably is all in the world of no. And so it is really effective right now to get to a place of yes. And what I mean by that is, yes, I'll figure out how to make this work. Yes, I will find a different way to talk with my kids. Yes, I will have a different kind of conversation with my boss. Yes, I will deal with having my kids in the background when I'm on Zoom. Yes, even though I don't feel like I have time, I will find a way to do something that gives me purpose. It changes all of our perspectives around what we're dealing with right now. And so this really is a good time to use yes to shift your perspective. At any point that you're stuck in no, figure out what you can say yes to. Figure out what you can say yes to about anything where you feel like you're stuck or frustrated. I have a friend recently who had a very brave conversation with her boss. She had gotten to a place with her kids at home and her job where she was so exasperated and exhausted that she was just about willing to sacrifice her job for it. And she had a very courageous conversation with her boss that she would not normally have, saying, this is what I can do during the day and this is what I can't do. And that's it. And her boss said, okay. And she thought, oh my God, it worked. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending you do that because that's a risky kind of conversation, to be that strong with your boss and say, this is what I can do and this is what I can't do because I have kids at home. But you could try some version of that. Figure out what it is that you need to say yes to figuring out, to being flexible, to being in a place of not knowing that brings other perspectives and possibilities. Saying yes to shifting from fear to fact. Saying yes to giving yourself grace and giving other people grace as well. Saying yes to shifting from there's nothing I can do about all this stuff to I determine how it goes. Saying yes to whatever your emotional state is, your fear or grief or anxiety, and giving yourself time to just dive into that so that you can get through it and emerge on the other side. Saying yes to finding your warrior state. All of that will create new ways of thinking and new ways of being under the current circumstances. Give that some thought today and over the weekend, and I will talk with you on Monday. You are ready to become a warrior at work so that you get to fully live. I'm inviting you to join our Warriors at Work program, where you'll identify your warrior self, find your warrior purpose, develop your warrior squad, and start living as a warrior leader using the E9 corporate coaching model that I developed after years of coaching and managing people. It's risk-free. If you fully engage and do the work and don't feel like it's working for you, I'll give you your money back. You can join just the first course or the whole series of 7 courses. Go to warriors-at-work.com to sign up. I'll see you there.